Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming back to listen to another fascinating episode of the Big Time Adulting Podcast. Today is actually a very fascinating episode, if I don't say so myself. Or is it if I do say so
I think if I
myself?
do, I think if I
If I do say so myself. Um, I have licensed clinical social worker Nicole Sachs here with me today. Nicole, hello.
Hello.
Nicole is has a therapist and has a strong Instagram presence, and also is an expert in healing chronic pain caused by traumas and how that shows up in our lives. And Nicole, I know I'm going to ask you to talk about a little bit more about your work. And then I really want to get into your story, which you've told me before about what happened to you and what you finally admitted out loud and helped you heal all this chronic pain that you were experiencing in your life. So I'm just going to let you take it away, talk about your practice, and let's go from there.
Okay. All right. Well, I for about over 20 years now. God, it's been since 2000. So almost 24 years, have been doing work with people in chronic pain and conditions. And one thing that we were just talking about before we jumped on air is I think it's really helpful for people to understand that chronic pain is not just if you're on disability or if you identify as someone with a very serious condition. Just like trauma is not just capital T trauma, abuse, neglect, abandonment, etc. Trauma can be death by 1,000 cuts, and so can chronic pain. And so when I use the term chronic pain, one thing it's really important for me to just start right off in saying is if you're a person who just gets headaches and feels achy, if you feel fatigue and like your days are like a drag, if you have maybe an irritable bowel diagnosis, or maybe you don't even have a diagnosis, but your stomach's always acting up, if you have anxiety and you feel panicky and you feel like you're struggling to get through your days, and many, many, many other symptoms that can qualify in my practice as pain, there are solutions that you might not know about. You know, I work with the brain science, I work with mind body medicine, and it's really, really fascinating stuff. So I want to start there because I know that Caitlin's population is maybe not people who have heard my stuff, and I want you to qualify. I want you to feel like you're included, because if you don't identify as someone being in chronic pain, I still want to help you improve your life. So that's the first thing I'll say. You want me to just like jump into my story, like kind of why I play in this space?
Yeah, I want, you interviewed me on your podcast not long ago, and I got to hear more about your story and particularly um, how you began your healing basically via motherhood. And how that all transpired. It's very interesting. So you tell what happened.
Okay. So, when I was 19 years old, I was a freshman at college, and I had what now is understood as an acute pain incident. Some people might understand it as like your back goes out, but my back went out so severely that my parents had to come to college and like physically carry me home. I needed help doing very basic tasks, help using the bathroom. I was completely disabled, and I was 19. And so when we went to the orthopedic surgeon and we got my films and my MRI, I was diagnosed with a condition called degenerative spondylolisthesis, which is a pretty severe abnormality of the lower spine. And of course, as any logic would say, they thought that was the reason for my back pain. I was in debilitating back pain. They took a film, they saw a very significant abnormality, structural abnormality. And so they said, well, this is why you're in pain. And so here's what you need to do to avoid spinal fusion surgery, which at the time was the standard of care for what I had. And P.S. in 1990, which was the year this went down, um, spinal fusion surgery involved weeks in a body cast and decreased mobility for life. So this certainly was not a surgery that anyone was recommending to a 19-year-old, but they basically said, you're not going to live till 40 without it, but let's see how far we can get you. So no more sports, no more travel, no more riding in the car for more than an hour because the bouncing could disjoint your back. Sleeping, very specific sleeping positions to support my back. No lifting things over 10 pounds. And then the kicker, which is it would be very seriously unlikely for me to ever have a biological child because the weight of the baby in the front could be catastrophic for my back. And so I was 19 and handed, like, I don't know if you'd call it a life sentence or a death sentence.
Yeah.
It's kind of both.
I
Um,
can't even imagine.
it was crazy. It was a mess. And so essentially I, with the help of steroids and muscle relaxers and opioids and all sorts, thank God I didn't get addicted at that point, but all sorts of what doctors can do. I moved from acute to chronic pain. So I became a person with a back problem. You know, everybody was always doing things for me. I felt super, super disempowered. I felt really self-pitying. The thing about the kid, I really put it out of my mind because I was the kind of child who would swaddle up my stuffed animals and like carry them around the house. Like I was ready to be a mom when I was 10. I was just one of those. Like, and some people
This
hear that.
is
What'd you
this is
say?
funny. This is funny because of the way things sort of transpired.
Yes, it certainly is. So that devastation was just too deep. Like I couldn't even consider, and not to mention, if we're really going to get into my inner pain, I am an only child, and my parents had a very difficult marriage, and so I felt very lonely and alone when I was a kid, and so I had decided super early on that I was going to make all of that go away because I was going to have lots of kids, and I was going to
Mm.
make this beautiful family, but I wanted them to be my biological children because nobody looked like me. This was a theme of my childhood. Everyone had siblings and everyone had family. I had no close family. My cousins both lived overseas, and I did not have anybody that I felt like I could relate to. It was my Meshuggah parents, and then it was me. And like that was, and so I had this whole plan. Well, of course, my diagnosis could have put that plan out the window if I had believed it. And so essentially I put that out of my head. I went on, I graduated from undergrad. I got a psychology, bachelor's in psychology. And then I was living in New York for a few years, but in chronic pain, like really kind of wearing everything with kit gloves, like, oh, I'm no, 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 I can't do that. Oh, I can't participate in that. Like it was really pretty devastating life. And when I was in grad school, and I don't know how deeply we want to get in this story, but I'll go quick. My mom was watching the Rosie O'Donnell show back when Rosie had her daily talk show, and Rosie had a segment on called Fix Jeanette, and Jeanette Barber was her producer who was in a motorized wheelchair. And Rosie had her on because nobody could figure out why she was in so much pain. She had diagnoses like plantar fasciitis and maybe tendonitis, but nothing seemed to make sense that she was in such excruciating pain that she couldn't walk. And when my mom was watching the follow-up episode, she actually turned it on in the after episode, and Jeanette Barber had just run the New York Marathon. And so my mom was like, holy fucking shit. I imagine I can swear on your podcast.
No, I don't like explicit language.
I know. We should have that like
I was going
warning.
to say, by the way, thank fucking God for daytime television and moms who watch it, right?
That's right.
I
That's
don't. Nobody
right.
does anymore, I don't think. But
I don't
okay,
think
go
there
on.
is daytime. Maybe there is. I
There's
haven't watched it in
probably, yeah.
somebody does it. But anyway, so my mom was watching Rosie, and Jeanette Barber ran the New York Marathon. My mom freaked out, and she called me and she said, "You need to get this book, Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno." And I was like, okay, why? I don't need a book. Something's wrong with me. I'm broken. Like I was offended. And most people are when they hear about mind body medicine because they can assume, are you saying the pain is in my head? Like, are you saying like I'm mentally something and my back hurts? Like, this is lunatic. Okay. So I had the same reaction as most people. And my mom said, just get the book. You're never going to freaking believe what I'm watching on TV. This woman is running. And like, so my mom's freaking out. So I go and I get the book and I read the book. And I know this is audio, so you guys don't see me putting air quotes. I was in my early 20s. I skimmed the book. I took a look at the book. I understood what this Dr. Sarno was saying. And what he was saying was that there is something that happens in our brains when we are in danger. Okay. And now I understand it far better many, many years later. but essentially I'm gonna translate it into like 2023 speak. When our brains are in long-term fight or flight, they
Mhm.
go into the space of protection because we're in a very primitive state. We have to survive. And when we are in this long-term fight or flight, our brains and our nervous systems perceive our repressed emotional world, anger, rage, shame, guilt, embarrassment, resentment, terror, despair. Okay, these fun things that we all love to feel. Our
Mm.
brains and our nervous systems perceive those things, and our full acknowledgement of those things to be a greater predator to our lives. Okay, this is not hyperbole. Truly, our systems think that if we feel those things, it will kill us. And so what happens is a switch is flipped and we go into long-term sustained fight or flight. We're bathed in adrenaline and cortisol. Our bodies are not built to be in long-term fight or flight. We're supposed to have bursts of it so we can flee or fight or freeze, but we are not supposed to live like that. And when we live like that, which is such a common situation in modern day society, the nervous system and the brain seek to protect us, right? So, how do they protect us? Slowing us down, making us take care of ourselves, making us say no to obligations, draw boundaries. Well, what's the best way to do that in polite society when we can't say no, when we feel guilty all the time, when we're always overscheduled, when we're trying to do it all? And this is especially moms, is they send us pain, stomach aches, headaches, back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, hip pain, knee. And there are so many diagnoses that are so real. I
And
have
everybody's
struggled.
husband is like, again,
Oh,
another head.
no, it's
Just kidding.
true.
I know, I
No,
know.
I
I'm
will
just
say,
making
like,
a joke. But go on. Yes. Okay. I
well,
get this because this has actually happened to me in real life, which is like I had been on like such an anxious spiral. It was like the end ish of, or the middle of 2020. We were moving. My son had just finished treatment. I was getting ready to sell my house. The pandemic had just begun. I was in the biggest like anxiety spiral of my life. And I woke up one morning and I could hardly see out of my right eye. Like I had this condition that was called central serous retinopathy, and it's brought on by like the stress. And I know because it's also happened to me subsequently at a different time when I was under a lot of pressure and stress. And it is very, I do 100% subscribe to the fact that our bodies give us a signal to stop or slow down when we are under stress.
right, because they're trying to save our lives. And so, like what I tell people all the time, like I could lecture to a room of 1,000 people. And if I say, raise your hand if you ever had a stressful day and got a headache, every hand in the room goes up. And I'm like, okay, keep your hand up if you went the next day for a CT scan of your brain because you thought you had a brain tumor. And like every people start to laugh. And I'm like, right. You already believe that an emotional stimuli, stressful day, can cause a physical symptom, a headache. But when things get chronic or when things get scary, like you can't see out of half your eye, or, people that have done my work have neuropathy. Sometimes their limbs are so numb that they can't walk. I work with people all over the world with severe long COVID who are debilitated to the point where they can't find the words they're looking for. These are very, very cognitive symptoms, terrifying. When things like that happen, we forget the power of our brain and our nervous system to send signals to our bodies of inflammation, constriction, tension. We forget. We'll believe we get a tension headache, but we forget it when it's a migraine disorder. And so, what I help people do is circumvent this entire process, turn it around, and save their own lives. And the spoiler of my life is that once I understood about mind body medicine and did the work myself, which I know I'll tell the story because I know that's the story that you're getting at. I have 3 children. I exercised till the day they were born. I have the same MRI that I've always had. I haven't had back pain in 20 years and it never degenerated. And it was probably there when I was born. And God bless the doctors. They aren't evil. They aren't malintentioned. They just this is still an emerging science, and it's not always known. And I think it's getting more and more well known now, but in Dr. Sarno's years, it really wasn't. And, so I'm very lucky to be second generation carrying this message, because it's obviously going to be much more widely regarded. But the story that Caitlin is referring to is when I originally, after I read this book, or whatever we call it, I looked at the book, I figured out something. I figured out that what Dr. Sarno was saying is that if we are very angry inside and we're repressing it, this is a very basic part of his theory, it can come out as back pain. That was the first thing I understood. So I decided, as a psychology undergrad and as a person who was in the middle of getting my master's in social work, so I was certainly very psychology minded, I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to do a science experiment on myself. I'm going to do a psychological experiment on myself. So when my back started to flare, I would pause and I would be like, why are you so angry? Just like mental inventory, list it out. What's going on? And I would be like, this is fucking bullshit. How dare that person talk to me that way? And, I don't even want to be here. And whatever I was thinking, I would just really tell the truth. Nobody was listening. It was all in my own mind. And I would attend to my back pain like 10 minutes later. I'm like, what's going on here?
Were you saying that stuff that you're saying in your mind? Were you saying it in your mind to yourself or out loud?
In my mind at the time, in my mind to myself. I was just sitting, we were having a party in between my two ears, and I was just like, all right, this sucks. I don't even want to be here. You know what? Screw you, screw you, screw you. I mean, it was very liberating because I could say anything I wanted. It was all in my mind. It was just a thought process. But that was the very beginning. I hadn't scratched the surface at the time. But what I did understand is 10 minutes later, I would attend to my back and the pain would be gone. And I was like, damn, there's something to this. That's how it began. That was enough at the beginning of my journey to let me throw my diagnosis out the window. I read the Sarno book in earnest, and I was like, I'm good. I had 2 babies. I exercised till the day they were born. I gave birth. I recovered quickly. I'm fine. I did have what they call a relapse because recovery is not a straight line. When my son was 10 months old, he was toddling around my back deck, and I was nervous that his walker was going to go over the stairs because there were like 3 stairs between the deck and the driveway. So I leaned over it and I picked it up. And it felt like there was a hot knife dragging through my back. It was the worst, some of the worst pain I've ever been in, like tantamount to childbirth. And I couldn't stand back up. And in that moment, the fear that coursed through me that I had screwed myself forever. I had tempted fate. I shouldn't have had these kids. I played with my life and now I've ruined my own life. Like that shame was deep. And that started the darkest year of my life because it was a year of a tremendous chronic pain. And I was in physical therapy 3 days a week, electric stim treatments on my back, therapeutic massages every week, which were not fun and delicious like massages usually are. They were horribly painful and miserable. I was on muscle relaxers, steroids, opioids. I could not take care of my children. I was an angry mom. Like when I was changing a diaper, I would like yell, like stop moving, like the opposite of everything that I have become. But it was a very, very dark year. And I was in real despair and I would cry myself to sleep every night. And I really felt ashamed. And all of this culminated in the incident at the deli where I was paying. I had my diaper bag slung over my shoulder. I had a 1.5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old, and I was trying to pay for our meal at the counter. And my kids had gotten hold of the gummy worms and the chocolate covered pretzels and all the things they put like right at the eye level of a 2.5-year-old with the impulse buy section. And they were just shaking them and they were running around. My children, I like to say, were very spirited. Isn't that the
Yes,
word we use,
that's
right?
the one we use.
Yeah. They were spirited children. And I started to pay and I felt my back seizing up. And I knew something really bad was happening, but I was so embarrassed and I was also so powerless. So I finished paying and I grabbed my kids by the wrists and I got to the car. But because we were in a really active parking lot and my kids were spirited, I could not let go of their wrists. And my back had seized up so badly that I couldn't get to my keys and I couldn't get to my phone. And I was standing there, and it was probably like the lowest point and the most beautiful point of my entire life, because I sat there and I just put my forehead on the driver's side window of my car, and my children just went limp, and I just cried. I didn't have anyone to help me. I was too humiliated to like ask a stranger. Like it was just a bad moment, as any parent can imagine how that could be. And I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I got my shit together and I got my kids in the car. I guess my back, like unclenched. And I got them home and I got them bathed and I got them to bed. And if anyone's wondering where my husband was, this was part of my rage. He worked all the time. He's now my ex-husband, but we're super, super, super good friends. It's another real success story in my life. But anyway, that may be for another podcast. But
Sure.
um, and I got them home, and I had a very spiritual moment where at the time I had very little spiritual life at all, but I sat in my room and I looked out of my window into just the night and the stars, and I said, I surrender. I give up. I have been a year in the medical model, killing myself with all these treatments. Nothing is helping. I'm only getting worse. And like, mess with me, don't mess with my kids. Like, I put my children in danger today. I almost really couldn't take care of them. And it was a very terrifying moment. And so it actually led me to go into the city and see Dr. Sarno in person. This was I guess it was in the very early 2000s, because I was already a licensed therapist when I had this relapse. And I went into the city. He was still in practice at NYU Rusk Center for Rehabilitation. And when I saw him, I had brought in a novel that I had written about every time my back hurt. So I'm like Miss Type A student, like Type A and A student, and I like had created this document that I felt was very sacred, that I like slid across the desk to him, and I was like, "This when I bend, when I lift, when I this," and he literally. And for anyone out there who's ever heard of Dr. Sarno or knows anything about him, they will laugh when they hear this because it's so him. He did not lose my gaze. Okay, so the two of us have our eyes locked, and he took my document and he threw it in the garbage can. And he had one of these like waste paper baskets, like they were like metal, and it made this like huge clamor when he threw it away. And he said, "Your document is immaterial. I don't care when your back hurts. Let me examine you." And he was a very gruff guy, but he had this beautiful truth about him. Like he did not mess around. And he took me into his office and he gave me a full examination. He looked at my films and he said, "Let me explain something to you. Yes, you have spondylolisthesis. You have it. But when I look at where your pain's showing up, you describe it. There's no way." He's like, "Go to Hopkins, go to Mayo, go to Harvard. No doctor will say that this film could account for down your leg, up your shoulder, in your neck, moving around." He's like, "You have something called TMS." And TMS is just an umbrella term for all these chronic illnesses. And it's so much to hear my story in one take. So I'll definitely, like, I have all sorts of online resources if anyone's interested in it. But essentially, what he said is, I have repressed emotions and I have to let them out. Kind of analogous to Bessel van der Kolk, the body keeps the score. And Gabor Mate, when the body says no, he says, your body is in sustained fight or flight. Your back pain is a result of it. And I am going to show you the path to freedom. And he,
So,
go ahead.
okay, yeah, sorry. So I want to, I have more questions I want to ask you about all of it. So I want you to say what he told you to do and what you said.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm a podcast host and I know I'm going too long.
No, it's
Okay.
good. Because I want to get to the questions that I have for you
Yes.
after that part of the story.
Yes, yes.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
So he told me that I needed to journal and I needed to get to the repressed emotions. So when I unleash them and I have a vent, my body's not going to be in fight or flight and sending me these pain signals. So I started to journal and I was writing about motherhood and I was writing all the things that all of us can relate to. I am tired. I am overwhelmed. I have 2 babies in cribs. I have 2 babies in diapers. This wasn't the plan. I was going to have them further apart and that's just not how it went. And all these things that are true. And I had an understanding, a consciousness, a voice kind of that came in and said, "You're lying." And I kind of looked up at the voice and I was like, no, I'm not. Those are all true things. And basically this inner voice said to me, right, but there is no way that these boring everyday things are so dangerous to feel that they are causing your nervous system to protect you with pain so bad you can't walk. So what is really going on? And I just made a decision in that moment to say fuck it all and to tell the truth. And I wrote the first line of JournalSpeak ever penned. And JournalSpeak is the vehicle I teach people to heal themselves, which is, I hate being a mother and I can't do it. And I'm failing and I suck and I've ruined everything and I'm trapped and I am not going to survive this. And I looked at the page. I have chills every time I tell this story because I looked at the page and I was like, I mean, think about a person who was told they would never have children. And then think about the way that felt to say. And the most important thing I always teach people about JournalSpeak is it doesn't stay true. It is the X marks the spot that leads you to dig. And I started to dig. At this point now, it was like all bets were off. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? I'm like asking questions into this notebook that I'm writing. I'm like, you don't hate babies. What you don't hate you love your babies. What's going on? And I just dug and dug. I got into childhood. I hate my parents. Fuck those two. They screwed it up so badly. And now I'm sitting here trying to be perfect and no one can be perfect. And now I'm always angry at myself. And and then it went right back to me, self-loathing. What's wrong with you? Everybody does this. Everybody around, look around and everyone's a parent. You can't do this. What kind of a loser are you? And I didn't get scared of what was coming. I just let it go and go. And what I landed in after this, I have no idea how many minutes or hours I did this because it was a blur. I landed in a place of tremendous compassion. My kids, now remember, my kids are young. They're under 2 and 4 at this point. And I gave myself and my children the craziest gift in that moment because by telling all those ugly truths, which is why I love Caitlin's work because she's always telling the truth on her Instagram, I set myself free and I realized I do not hate being a mother and I do not hate myself and I don't even hate my parents. I was really lost in desperately trying to save myself from the pain of my childhood by having a perfect family. I was going to have the kids and the husband and the life, and it was a fucking fail. And it was a fail, not because it was a fail. It was a fail because every life is a fail. We cannot be perfect. We cannot attain what we thought we were going to have in some storybook Disney movie when we were kids. And when we don't know that, there's so much emotional repression that is necessary. So I woke up the next morning, Caitlin, and my back pain was 80% gone, never to return. Over the next month or two, I journal spoke about everything in my life. I cried, I fought, I won every argument. I was full of gratitude. I started to understand that anxiety and excitement are the same exact they transpire exactly the same in the human body. So I started to understand my anxiety, which had been with me since I was like 4. I just did the work. And within a few months, my back pain was totally resolved. It's been 20 years. I've not felt it since. And I went to Dr. Sarno and I said, how can I be of service? You have saved my life. You have changed my life. I have changed my life. And I started working with him. I was at this point a licensed therapist. So I was lecturing with him at NYU. And here we are 20 years later. I work with people all over the world, and it's not just back pain, it's all sorts of things. And you have so much more power than you realize to affect your health. And there you go.
Oh, hot damn, Nicole. I know okay. The story is incredible, but I have to ask you, but like now I have to go back to this mom part because this back pain for you has surfaced throughout your life at other times. Now it sounds like it's all sort of stemming back to your childhood and that kind of thing, which you were able to release or whatever. But I do think that in that moment what you're saying is about admitting that you didn't like being a mother while acknowledging you love your children. There is sort of this mutual exclusiveness between those two things that I think causes so much guilt for mothers out there today, because it's really hard to be a mom, especially in that phase. It's like so thankless and exhausting and brutal. Most days I found it to be that way. And it was a real shocker for me to feel that way about motherhood. Now, I would go through every single bad day I ever had as a mother 100 times over if it meant having my children in my life, because I love them so deeply. But what you said then, you went back and said you realized you didn't hate being a mother. So do you think that if mothers are feeling this way, like maybe I just don't like being a mom, is that then leading back to some other unresolved trauma or whatever, or effort to uphold this unattainable version of being a perfect mother and feeling like you're failing, and that's why we don't necessarily like motherhood, because we're doing it sort of according to societal standards, not according to what's within?
Right.
What do you
Yes.
think about that?
Okay. So the first thing I want to say, and it's so important, is that feelings aren't facts. And we really believe our feelings. We take our feelings very seriously. And
Yes.
I think it's so important. And as a therapist, I've been helping people with this for years, which is feelings aren't facts. We have to pause when we have a feeling and get curious about it instead of being so sure that it defines us. And so when I'll speak for myself, but I can speak for anyone who's feeling this. When I realized that I had to write out that horrid, humiliating line, I hate being a mother, I let it happen. And I think that's the problem, is we are hiding behind that which we do not want to say. And then all these feelings come up because we're trying to compensate for not saying it by, like, the feeling could be, I'm really guilty, I have to do more. Or I should have said yes to that obligation, so now I'm going to perseverate and like think poorly of myself and think like I'm the other moms are judging me. These things that feel very real to us, and they are real, have a subtext. They have things underneath them because we feel like failures and we are scared to say it because people are frightened. If they say the unthinkable, if they say the unspeakable, it will become true for them. And what I help people understand is the exact opposite. When you, in the privacy of your journal speak, and when I teach people to journal speak, I teach them to write it and throw it away. One of my favorite clients used to say to me, Nicole, it's like blowing your nose in in a tissue. Like, do you want to look at it again? No, throw it away. It's a purge. And so that's why it's so freeing, because it doesn't stay true. So I had to say I hate being a mother. Why? Because in that very moment, it felt like something I needed to say because I was scared to say it. It was almost like playing with it. Like, is this the problem? Well, the only way I can do it is like from my solar plexus to say it. And then I said it. And then immediately I was like, wow, okay, I didn't die. I didn't get swallowed by the earth. What's underneath it? And then and like when you say, is this trauma? I always want to like make people a little less frightened of the word trauma.
Right.
There's a lot of talk about trauma. It's very, very of the moment.
Yes, I
Capital,
sometimes feel like that word is really annoyingly trendy in
yes.
a lot of ways, in which I don't tend to use it, but I'll let you explain what you're about to say about it, because I think it's important. I think I know
Yeah,
what
and
you're going to say, but
I think the thing is this, like let's hold both and, okay? Let's give the word the power it deserves and not be afraid to use it, and also say, all right, we can all like take a breath, okay? Like trauma means in this case anything from million little t traumas, moving when you were a kid, financial insecurity, a parent's divorce, being bullied at school. These might not rise to like abuse and neglect, but they were little traumas for you, and they build up and they build up and they affect your self-esteem and they affect your personality development. And so they're real. And I think it's very important to acknowledge, if it's real for you, it's real. Like, I do not care if someone else thinks you're being hysterical or overreactive. A lot of women are said you're too sensitive. That is a
mhm.
very, very like uncompassionate thing to say to somebody. Your feelings are your feelings, but only you can be empowered to be curious about them. So, if you, for example, have to say, I hate being a mom, there could be, in the definition of trauma we just laid out, many little traumas that are whispering in your ears and making you feel like a failure. So, of course, if you feel like a failure, how are you going to enjoy this endeavor that you have embarked upon? You're not going to enjoy it.
I think just as important as like making you feel like a failure is also being told that you will or should enjoy this
Yes.
journey of motherhood. And when you are not, for very real reasons, because it fucking sucks sometimes, you feel badly. Right. And
Yes.
so it's like, I do fucking hate this today. I don't want to be doing this. Right. Like that's some days that's how we feel. Like I really related to what you said when you were saying you felt like the angry mom sometimes, just like just sit still, like when I'm changing your diaper, like
Yeah.
that rage and anger that surfaces sometimes because of all of that tedious, just relentless, just annoying stuff that mothers are dealing with children.
Yes. And I want to inspire people. Okay. So, like my kids at the time that I'm telling the story, my third wasn't even born yet. But my kids, my first two are 22 months apart. And then between my second and my third are 3 years. So, I mean, I have three kids under the age of 5. So, just to paint the picture. So,
Yeah.
today,
It's a
they are
shit show.
it's a shit show, capital S shit show. So right now, as we stand today, they are 20, almost 19, and 15. So it's I am down the line. I will tell you,
Yeah.
everybody out there, it gets easier, and then it gets harder, and then it gets excruciating, and then it gets easier. But what I want to say is this: because I had first of all, because I had to save my own life. My pain was a gift. My pain was an invitation to the precipice of the truths that were awaiting my acknowledgement. And when I got there and I spoke the unspeakable, here's what happened. And here's the inspiration I really want to give to every person listening, whether they struggle with any chronic condition or just that motherhood's a drag that Caitlin was just saying. When I allowed myself the freedom of expression to say the whole thing, which is why I love your work, Caitlin, because you are saying the whole thing and giving other people permission to say the whole thing. When I realized I'm not enjoying this is hard, this is grueling, this is thankless, all the things that we have moments of, what happened is it opened me up to love so much more because I
Hmm.
had no idea how tightly I was holding myself together to not feel those things. And when I let them out only in my journal speak, I did not tell my kids, I did not tell my husband at the time, I didn't tell my mom. I did the work personally and privately to myself. First of all, my pain fell away. But second of all, I look at my children and I have to brag for a minute, and I'm going to brag about not the things that parents usually brag about. You know, they're excellent colleges. And I mean, they are all doing amazing things, but that's not what it is. My children would prefer to be with me than anyone else in the world. They will choose me. And it doesn't mean they don't love their friends. They love their friends. I have social kids. They are out in the world. 2 just came back from the Bonnaroo Music Festival. Like my kids are out in the world. But if I say, do you want to go to dinner with me tonight? Oh my God, yes. Let's do it. I'll go out after. Like my kids are my fucking people. They are my friends and I am also their mother and they respect me and we love each other. And why? Because I gave myself the gift to not parent them through the lens of my own dysfunction. And that is a gift that it never stops giving because when my kids are experiencing something and we all know how this feels, it's like your heart is walking around outside your body. It's like the most grueling, and especially if your kids are struggling with something that you struggled with as a kid, you know, like body image, popularity, feeling less than, you know, like comparing themselves to others. Like it's enough to want to like shut your own life down and theirs, to like watch your own pain be played out in a person you love more than yourself. But if you're not trying to deal with your own shit through your kids, you can just parent them as the people that they are. And then they get to have that unique experience of being alive, and you get to be the person they want to come to. So it it is truly like a life-changing thing to do this work.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've got to get started like right now.
No pressure. It's a lifetime journey.
I honestly though, like when I hear stuff like what you're telling me now, my kids are still young, but they're getting a little older. I'm hitting a groove like in a sweet spot with them, but still I'm terrified all of the time, feeling guilty that the way that I'm parenting or things like that are going to screw them up or damage my relationship with them or make them angry or resentful of me later in their lives. And I couldn't honestly tell you like why I feel that way necessarily. Like I do think I am a good mom. I really try hard. I think my kids love me. But I just don't know why I can't shake that feeling all of the
Yeah.
time. I mean, what you were saying is that you said that you were able to parent your kids not in through the lens of your own dysfunction. I'm like, how do I know if I'm doing that? What if I am parenting them through the lens of my own dysfunction?
Well, here's the thing. First of all, okay, so let's back up a little. The best posture to parent is to start with the following sentence. Everything is ruined. You
Yes,
must
everything's fucked up.
Everything is ruined. Everything is ruined. You must start there. This is a messy human life. And why is it gorgeous? It's gorgeous because we have pain and we have sickness and we have difficulty so that we can see the polar opposite, which is our joy and our gratitude and our connection. Like, here's what it is to be alive. There may be a cure for chronic pain, but there is no cure for the human condition. Motherhood at the top of the list. So if you can start with everything is ruined, okay, phew. Nobody has it going on. Nobody's gotten this right. Everybody's fucking up their kids. No matter how perfect the situation, your child will have a reason to be in therapy about you. I don't care who you are because like I have friends who are what one might imagine is like the pinnacle of like what we all seek to be, never raise their voice, so mellow. And when I say I have friends, I mean they're my age. So now their children are like college age kids. They're like, oh God, my mother's so hippy dippy, so annoying. I was always so jealous of like the boundaried strict parents down the street. Like you cannot win.
Win,
You
yeah.
cannot win. And so that's what's beautiful about it. You can stop trying to win. You can stop trying. You know, I often, when I used to have a private practice and I would work with couples and we would work on parenting, I would say, here is what I have learned clinically and through experience. There are two things that matter at the end of the day. Does your child feel that they are lovely, they are worthy of love and worthy of the success and the space they take up in the world? Do they feel that? Because there is a possibility through all sorts of dysfunction to show them that. And here's how we show it to them. It's so simple. When you make a mistake, say, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I just super had a tantrum. I was the one who had the tantrum. I yelled at you. I still want you to put your shoes on, but what I just did wasn't cool.
Yeah.
What does that show them? It shows them they're worthy of love, they're not bad, and it shows them that they are not wrong and they are not in trouble. And it is essential. And that's honestly the pinnacle of all of it. Like, yes, of course, we want them to eat right and we want them to have manners and we want them to be able to integrate into situations and we want them to listen and we want them to go to sleep. But at the end of the day, all of those things, the thread that runs through it is, do they feel worthy of love and do they feel worthy of success? Can they show up in a room and say, I'm here and I deserve to be heard? You know? And if you screwed up 10 times, apologize and fix it. Kids are so resilient.
Yeah.
They want to do is forgive you. So this is not like a threat. It's actually just an invitation that it's almost impossible to screw it up if you're keeping those two things in mind.
Yeah, it's so important. And like, it's just, I think all of us now, because of I talk about this a lot, just like the overwhelm of information and advice that's going around out there and these, scripts to use with your children. And this is actually the right thing to say in this situation versus this, like, try this. And I'm always kind of like, holy shit, like this is too much thinking. I want to just be who I am for my kids. And that's kind of like what the message, if I could give to anyone, is what I believe is that whatever you are doing is the best thing to be doing, not what somebody else is doing. Forget about, because like you said, we're all fucked up.
Yeah. Yes.
It's such a relief.
Yes, and it has to be where we begin. And like, I'll tell you another thing. This might be a little bit more advice for kids a little older, but I think it's really helpful. I just call myself out on what I am and I say, and I'm okay with it. For
Yeah.
example, we all have parenting fails. And one of my great parenting fails is I don't cook. I literally don't. I'm a working mother. I have children who have three different. My daughter's a vegetarian. My son eats three foods, and my other daughter would like eat escargot. Okay, so I have like these three incredibly different people, and if I cook one thing, there's only one person that's going to eat it, and I just decided, and this is I'm not proud of this by the way, that fuck it. So like I was the opposite of the parenting books. I made mac and cheese, chicken, and pasta. I would kill myself to make all three when they were little, whatever they wanted. It was definitely not what like all organic and all that stuff. And now that they're older and one goes to dance and one goes to music and one is working and whatever, we do a lot of ordering in. I
Yeah.
really like,
Right.
I make I we sometimes we go out to dinner, but I guess the reason I'm saying this is my daughter loves to cook. And I see in her sometimes a yearning for more like cooking and family dinners. Like I see in her where she's going to talk to her therapist, okay? And what I say to her is, you know, I couldn't do it all. And this is one of the places I really let it go. Maybe you'll decide that you want to run your household differently and like that will be wonderful. I this is the way I did it. And you know what? I'm all right with it. And she's like, no, mommy, like I'm all right with it. And I go, you are or you're not. And it's okay. Like we
Yeah.
can't do it all. And like that's a place where I decided to deprioritize because emotionally and actually it became too much for me. And so that's a choice I made. And like one of the things that I love about Glennon Doyle's advice to moms is instead of lecturing your children on what you think they should be, say, would I want this for my child? So, like, would I want her to be in guilt over the things that she's not doing when she's a mom? Like, would I want her to feel like she couldn't be honest? No. So, how am I going to do that? I'm going to be that. I'm going to demonstrate that as a lived experience. And then it gives her the permission to choose her own failings and then to be able to be honest with her kids about them, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I think that's one of the benefits of today's parenting is that we are encouraged to admit to our children where we are flawed. And I do that all the time and it makes me immediately feel better because they are understanding. They
yes,
really are. This morning I said, like, I remembered randomly this incident from probably a year and a half ago. I have no idea when it happened, but my kids had just gone to bed and I never watch TV. And randomly this one night I had wanted to watch some show. And my son, my oldest, is like, he's like the remote control hoarder and he just like hides them where he wants them to,
right,
whatever. And I couldn't find the remote, and they are always in like our nicer den area rather than the playroom. And I just like, whatever. And I went into our den to like watch the show for the first time in forever. And I can't find the remote. And I like went upstairs, got him up out of bed, and I was like, where is the remote? This is unacceptable. This is an adult space. You can't be able, I went like crazy. And
right.
then this morning I was like, remember when I went like ape shit over the remote that one time? And he was like, yeah. I was like, listen, I admit I was totally out of control, but like, stop hiding the remotes, honestly, you know?
So good.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
it's really but see
and we
like
all
isn't
laughed about it. Like we all
yeah.
laughed. So it's just, I think when you can like address those moments and humor, what a beauty, like a beautiful thing to use to like
Yes.
deflect. So yeah, it's all, I just appreciate so much your perspective on this in reassuring the mothers out there that it's okay to feel however you feel and that nobody is perfect. Nobody's doing this thing like all right according to the book, and somebody's way might look better to you in the moment and may not produce that awesome result later down the line or whatever. Your kids are going to hate us no matter what.
Yeah,
For
and like
something.
here's
Just
the thing. Here's the thing. Like I obviously know you're joking, but I have to tell you, I think they're going to hate us a lot less
mhm.
if we are always doing two things, which is showing up, like you said, flawed and honest, and then just taking responsibility. You know, I had a really angry father, and he was a really dissatisfied person in life. And he died when I was 27, so it's been a really long time. But like, I remember thinking if once, literally once, he had gotten down on my level and looked me in the eye and been like, that was about me and not you.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time, it would have changed my entire life because it took years of therapy for me to decide I wasn't a bad person because I was so disappointing to him all the time, and to figure out, oh, I see, like he was struggling with his own this and that. Like what we can do for our kids, like if you want to save 10 years of therapy for your kid, own what is yours.
Yeah.
They will love you more for it. And it's the same exact energy as journal speak. When you're alone with your journal speak, own what is yours.
Yeah.
So I hated that today. And then you can say, and I feel terrible about myself. I don't
Yeah.
want to be a person who hates it. It just frees you, and it transforms the situation. I have been up in my room with my notebook and taken my family down one by one, just insults and whatever, ripped it up, literally ripped it up, thrown it in a garbage that no one could ever find it, and walked into the kitchen like, my loves, my,
Yeah.
it just clears it because it's not really you. It's not the grown up mommy that feels these terrible things. It's your own inner child who's not getting her needs met because it sucks being a mom because nobody's taking care of you anymore. And like we can feel that. It's okay to feel that. It frees you up to then take care of others.
Yeah. And then the way I just wanted to also mention, because you touched on this, that it's not only pain, it's not only chronic pain. This is like anxiety, depression, all these other, mental health
Yes.
um, conditions that arise via not talking about, not saying out loud, not acknowledging, honoring the feelings that you have.
Exactly. And I want to I'll just answer a frequently asked question because I know if people are new to this they're going to be asking this. But wait a second. I'm really mad at my husband. Do I have to get divorced? I really hate my job. Do I have to quit it? My kids are driving me crazy. Do I have to drive away and never come back? Like people are like, "Wait, how is this going to work if I can't change my life?" And that was the
Yeah.
number one question we used to get on the Sarno panel at NYU. And here's what I will say, because we're talking about brain science, like you and I are talking a lot about like real lifey stuff, but when it comes to the pain, the anxiety, the depression, the symptoms, all the diagnoses, we're talking about brain science. If your brain is no longer in fight or flight, I know this is going to sound insane to people, the pain signals stop firing because the necessity of the pain signals is to protect you, to slow you down, to get you away from the danger. Your toddler could be the danger to your life,
Yeah.
according to your nervous system. So, how do we get you away from the toddler? Well, you have like a blinding migraine, you have to call the babysitter. So, the point is, as soon as we bring those feelings up in that private manner in our journal speak, the pain will go away. It doesn't mean your life is going to be perfect, but you do not need to change your life to get out of these chronic conditions in the work that I do. And I think it's super important for people to understand that, because otherwise they feel like, I don't want to go there. I'm not leaving my marriage, so I don't even want to know how I feel about my husband. Like, that's not the goal. The goal is to know how you feel so your body doesn't have to protect you from it. And then let's say, like in my situation, my ex-husband, he worked all the time and I felt really alone in raising the kids. Once I got to how resentful I was, I didn't, that was not the reason we got divorced. That was years later. I was able to say to him, I figured out something that's really important to me. And I think it's our relationship is going to really benefit if we can talk about it. And like, that's something I think I didn't even know I needed to say. I was like in a big suck it up mode at the time. And like, although we ended up getting divorced for like many different reasons that were the right choice for us, he is my best friend. He is my partner in this life. We both have other relationships. That's not the point. We like raise our children together, and we incorporate our whole lives. Like we're a very modern family. And like, it's because we have learned to really speak honestly to each other in a way that's not threatening. And that is like the end result of this work, but it begins as a very private process.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that level of like trust that you have to feel with that other person to be that honest and to know that you can say those things without risking, abandonment or whatever. That wow, that's like the next level, right? To just
Yes.
be able to really put that stuff out there.
Yes.
And that's also just like completely letting go of your own ego in these matters, right? Like, just if something that I'm doing is bothering somebody, it's actually probably more about them than it is about me. It's like, or something somebody else is doing to bother me, it's probably about me, more about
Yes.
me than it is about them, and figuring that out, right?
Exactly. Like, say, for example, that's a perfect example. Somebody who you love, who you have to deal with on a daily basis, is doing something and it just gets you, it gets you, it gets you. It is about you.
Yeah.
No one can make you feel anything that doesn't exist somewhere in there already. So when you do this kind of excavation and you figure out how you really feel about things, sometimes other people really stop bothering you. They're
Yeah.
like, oh man, that's just, Jane being Jane. And she's always like that. And like, it's not such an injury anymore. The word trigger is as ubiquitous as trauma. And the word trigger technically means I'm sitting here today, something has happened to me, and all of a sudden, I am actually in the past. A trigger requires that you're not here, you're somewhere else. You are reacting that is in a bigger way to the situation because something that happened now reminded you so much of something that happened in the past that hurt you that you're back there. That's why that's like the definition of a trigger. When you go
Hmm.
back and actually unroot the past and just allow it to be. You don't have to solve your problems. You don't have to make nice with people. You just let it be something. You hold yourself with compassion and kindness. You will be shocked. It is astonishing that certain things that used to trigger the fuck out of you, you're like, oh, whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's great. It's
It's
a
so
great
great.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, I just said something like to that effect on my stories the other day. Like, yes, it's like I understand it's like good to do work on yourself and grow and that kind of thing, but what about also just accepting
Yes.
yourself fully for as the flawed, fucked up little human you are?
It's a magical thing. Like there's a line. It's a book called White Hot Truth by Danielle Laporte, and one of the lines that I love is she says, "In this moment, can you not crave to be different than you are right now? Like just think about it. If it's possible, don't crave to be different than
Mm,
you are right now, because here is the sacred paradox." Transformation begins with the radical acceptance of what is.
mm,
And it is a magical thing because if you stop fighting what is, Byron Katie says we can fight reality, but we only lose 100% of the time. Like, if you can stop fighting what is, all of a sudden, all this space is freed up, and you're like, oh, okay, well, here I am with 3 kids, and it's a shit show, and my house never gets cleaned, and I never finish anything. And once the second one gets better, the other one gets sick. Yeah, okay, well, that's what is, and can't fight it. So, okay, that opens you up to be like, okay, well, what do I want to do today? How do I want to spend my time? Instead of spending all this energy being like, I hate it, I don't like it, this sucks, it never's going to get better. Like, it's such a freeing space to live.
yeah, it really truly is. Acceptance is just so powerful. And then also not to discredit the fact that like you might actually be burnt out and need a little bit of a break or some more support around, right? Like, it's also validating to know like it's time for you to get a fucking babysitter,
Yes.
go like whatever you need to do, take a walk, get anything.
Yeah, and I want to say 2 things, and this is like stepping out of my therapist role and just being like straight mom to mom. If you can afford it, please get a babysitter. You're a good mom. If you can give yourself the permission, go away for the weekend with your partner. You're a good mom. Like you are a good mom. Like, we put way too much pressure on ourselves to be something that isn't helping our kids, by the way. You
No.
can't give from an empty cup. Like, I beg of you to forgive yourself. I beg of you to say 2 hours of TV, 5 hours of TV, however much you need to get through that particular day, so be it. Like,
Totally.
I really, really, I want people to really forgive themselves and give themselves a break.
Give yourself a break and get yourself a snack.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, before you go, what's your favorite snack, Nicole?
Oh my goodness. I'm such a snacker. If my kids were listening to this, they would just be like, how's she going to choose? But I'm going to go with, just because it's in the moment, Trader Joe's Takis.
What's a
Have
Taki?
What is it? Caitlin, have you lived?
No, apparently not. Tell me
Okay.
how
A
to live.
Taki, a Taki is, if you go to like a regular grocery store, you could get something called Takis, which are like these rolled up like tortilla chips that are dipped in this really spicy like Dorito situation. But I don't like regular Takis. I like Trader Joe's Takis that are not called Takis because they're like the Trader Joe's brand.
What are they
But
called? Like Joe
they're like Trader
Joe's or
Joe's
whatever.
spicy tortilla rolls or
Okay.
something.
Wait,
But
I do know what they are. They're pretty spicy.
they're very spicy, but I'm a spicy
Yeah.
girl.
Okay. I like
I
that. I
like it.
like that. I like everything about you, Nicole. Um, this was honestly, I feel so much better right now. You're amazing. I really and truly do. It feels so great to talk about that stuff. And this was such a real and open conversation. I think I even said some things that surprised myself. You always are, I think I feel better generally because I say a lot of truths every day. But there's always the next level. There's always deeper.
Yes, and another thing that I love is when you see someone else being free, it gives you permission to be free. And I think,
Yeah.
Caitlin, you and I are both doing that, and I love that about us, and I love that about anybody who's doing that, because like let's be the collective that gives each other permission to be honest and to set ourselves free.
Yes. Go us.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I will be in touch with you, and we'll have to have you back for another one of these pep talks.
Love it. You're so welcome.